Galen. You've got to do it.
It's you, or it's, alas, poor Lurik.
Look, save your breath. Now, it is out of the question. I refuse. I absolutely put my foot down.
Okay, now use your foot to kick up, right? Now brace yourself like I showed you. You ready?
No way.
Good. Let's go.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Ape Nation, your number one source for all things Planet of the Apes on YouTube. My name is Josh, and today I am giving my review of episode 14, aka the final episode of the short-lived 1974 TV series, Planet of the Apes. If you like what I do here and want to show your support, be sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things apes. For those who do not know, this is the conclusion to a series of reviews that has been going on all summer, that has been following every single episode of the show, that has all been leading up to a full series review that will be coming out next week to coincide with the 50-year anniversary of the show. If you haven't seen those reviews of the previous episodes, you can check all of them out right here. And for those who want to watch the episode, or the entire show for that matter, I've put a link down in the description where you can watch the entire show totally free. And for one last time, for those who have not seen the show and don't want to be spoiled, I'll start with my general thoughts up top before going deeper into the episode and giving all of my more detailed thoughts. So if you're interested in hearing what I had to say about the episode, but don't want to be spoiled just yet, you can watch the first part of the video, click away, go watch the episode for yourself, and then come back to hear the rest of my thoughts. So with all of that said, let's dive into Planet of the Apes, episode 14, Up Above the World So High. After Galen, Virdon, and Burke stumble upon a human who is attempting to fly by building a hang glider, the man and his machine are soon captured and investigated by a chimp scientist. She, along with Virdon, Burke, and Galen, attempt to help the man in his quest to fly, but not before the scientist's true intentions are revealed. So one thing I do want to mention before I get into my thoughts is just a quick note about this episode. This is actually an episode that was never aired in its original run. This was not released. I might be wrong about this. Someone can correct me out in the comments, but I'm fairly certain this episode was actually not revealed until this series eventually came out on DVD at some point in the early 2000s. So for a very long time, this episode had never been viewed. So there are actually a lot of people, probably a handful of you, that have maybe not seen this episode before that did watch the original run of the series back in 1974. So this is an episode that I'd always heard about, but I'd never seen, despite the fact that I had seen a handful of episodes prior to doing this full rewatch. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. And of course, I'll be going into a lot more of the behind the scenes history like that and many other things when I do my full series review next week. But as for my general thoughts on this episode, I thought it was really enjoyable. This is a very fun episode with a great balance of humor, adventure, and also a good amount of tension. I think it's well directed. I think it's a somewhat simple but really well told story with some clever moments, and it brings the trio of Galen, Virdon, and Burke together successfully one last time. It doesn't really feel like a real finale for the show, obviously, because it was canceled, but I think it still works well as a solid episode for the series to end with. I also think that the new character introduced, Carcia, is a really enjoyable character who I think is played very well by Joanna Barnes, and Roddy McDowall shows why he was the face of the original franchise here, because his acting range in this episode is, I think, at an all-time high, and I'm going to get more into that in just a minute, but I think him and Joanna Barnes steal the show in this episode by far in terms of acting, and overall I had a really great time watching this. It's about as good as I could hope for in the final episode, considering that it was canceled. So all in all, I think this was a solid episode for the show to go out on. I think it ended things on a high note, and now I'm going to get into why. Like I've just mentioned up top, Joanna Barnes as the character of Carcia, the female chimp scientist that is introduced in this episode, I think she gives a very interesting, fun, and charismatic, but also somewhat sinister performance. I think she's great here. I loved how she was able to manipulate me as an audience member into liking her, despite the fact that as we get further into the episode, as we see, she's not exactly a nice person. Her intentions are not exactly pure. And so I really liked the way that she played this type of character. I think she almost made it look effortless, and I was just very, very impressed with her performance. And I think the character is also really strong, a very likable villain with at first cleverly disguised motives. I also love the dynamic and the chemistry between Carcia and Galen. I think that chemistry between Joanna Barnes and Roddy McDowall is excellent from the moment that these two meet, and it's an unexpected relationship that works surprisingly well. And it was something that, as I was watching it, you know where it's kind of heading, you know it's going to end with them parting ways, but it would have been really fascinating, I think, to see this character return in maybe a more of an ally role down the line, maybe have some sort of redemption arc and see more screen time between the two of them had the show continued. I just really liked the chemistry between these two. I thought they had a fun relationship that was one of those, is it real? Is it not? Is she playing with him? Does he have any real feelings? I thought it was a really interesting dynamic. That's something that I don't think we got quite enough of, but what we got, I think, was great. And speaking of Roddy McDowall, like I mentioned earlier, I think this might be the best acting that he's given in the entire show, or at the very least, I think it shows off how much range he has as an actor. I think he is doing such a great job in this episode at showcasing how funny he can be, how charismatic he can be, how dramatic he can be, and how intense he can be, all in one episode. And I think he does that so well. There's so many moments throughout this episode where I was just really impressed with how great Roddy McDowall was in this role, even behind makeup. There's a specific scene where I was just mesmerized by his dramatic performance, and for a second I was like, oh yeah, I'm watching someone who is wearing a chimp costume give what is a very, I think, soft-spoken but beautiful dramatic performance.
I am delighted to believe that chimpanzees are superior to other apes, seeing I'm a chimp.
And then the story here, I think, is very fun and fitting to a degree for the final episode of the show. Even if it's not a true finale, it's simple, but it's well executed, it's well directed, there's some fun turns and moments, and honestly, that's all I could really ask for, considering the circumstances of which this episode had to be made under. They couldn't really give a proper ending, they didn't know this was going to be their final episode, and so with all of that context understood, again, I think this is pretty much as good of an episode as we could have gotten, and I really enjoyed the story that they were telling here. And also, I think the story in this episode allows Galen, Virdon, and Burke to work together and get a pretty good amount of screen time together one final time. I think it's a really great episode for the trio of them working on this hang glider, working with Lyric's character. I thought that was really fun to watch. It's not the best that the trio's ever been together, but it was still solid, it was still enjoyable, and it was just nice to get to see that at least one more time before the show wrapped up. And then I mentioned the directing already, but I just really thought that this was a well-made episode in terms of tone. I think it was a very well-balanced episode. There's a lot of fun adventure, but then there's also a lot of really tension-fueled drama, and then also almost thriller-esque moments throughout, specifically the fight/breakout scene towards the end of the episode. I thought that was really well done. I thought it was effectively intense, and that heightened tension throughout it felt almost thriller-like something out of almost like a 70s or 80s action thriller movie. I just wish that scene was longer, but still, I really enjoyed it. The same can be said for one of the two flying sequences with the hang glider. I thought the second one towards the end of the episode was really tense, really well edited, and really well directed. I thought the first flying sequence was also a lot of fun, but the second one I thought was just pure tension, and so I think the directing and the overall balance of tone here is really well done. And then speaking of the flying scenes, I think the flight concept is handled in this episode in a way that makes sense for the continuity of the original films in a really smart way, and having them discover it but then hiding it from the public, burying it from ever being a part of history. And I really enjoyed how that was used in this story. It only really scratches the surface in terms of the thematic approach that they're going for with that and what they're trying to talk about there, but still, it was enjoyable and I liked seeing it. The only thing about this episode that I didn't love was Lyric's character. I didn't dislike him, I just thought he was fine. He serves the story and he's likable enough, but I didn't find him memorable. He's just kind of there to springboard the story into action and to get the characters that we are interested in to do the stuff that we want to see them do. So that is really the only negative I have to say about this this episode, if you can even call it a negative. But overall, I thought this was a really fun, exciting, well done episode. Again, it doesn't feel like an ending, but it's still a good note for the show to go out on. And that's, again, like I said earlier, all I could really have asked for. But I want to know what you guys think of this episode, assuming you've seen it, again, because this was an episode that was never originally aired. What did you think of this episode? Do you think it was a solid finale? Do you think it works better as a finale than I did, or do you just think it was an overall enjoyable episode? What'd you think of the flying scenes? Because I really enjoyed them. What'd you think of the way the flying stuff was handled? What'd you think of Carcia as a character? And am I crazy for wanting to see more of Galen and Carcia on screen? Because I really enjoy that stuff, and it was some of my favorite stuff that I've seen in this entire show. I want to know all of your thoughts down in the comments below. I will be back one more time next week with my full series review of the show that will be handled more like my movie reviews that I did for the Planet of the Apes films earlier this year, that, like I said, will involve going over the history of the franchise, my experience, everything I have positive to say, all my negatives to say, everything in depth. So that will be out at the end of next week. But until then, thank you so much for checking out today's video here on Ape Nation. If you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things apes. I'll catch you in the next one, so until then, goodbye.